Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice-Burgh To Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from. Last night in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, the New York Rangers officially eliminated Jake Guentzel and the Carolina Hurricanes in Game 6, and that did a few things pertaining to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Ensures that the Penguins will not have a first-round pick in this year's draft. Instead, they will get Philadelphia's second-round pick at 44th overall. It also ensures that the Penguins will not get the Carolina Hurricanes' fifth-round pick, which was conditional in the Jake Guentzel trade. So with that, and obviously the conclusion of the Erik Karlsson trade about a week and a half ago, the Penguins' draft picks are set. Second rounder, 44th overall from the Philadelphia Flyers. Second rounder, 46th overall, their own. Fourth rounder, 111th overall. Sixth rounder, 175 overall. And then two seventh rounders, the 207th overall selection, and the 225th overall selection. So that's where they're going to be picking in the draft at the end of June at the Sphere in Las Vegas. But what it also did was it put a narrative to bed, a narrative that has been out there since the NHL trade deadline that Kyle Dubas got fleeced by Don Waddell and the Carolina Hurricanes in this trade. And I think everybody's immediate reaction was, man, it would have been nice if he would have gotten one of the top three prospects from the Carolina Hurricanes for a 40-goal scorer in Jake Guentzel, a playoff performer in Jake Guentzel. And what a lot of people had said was, well, he's on an expiring deal. It was a buyer's market, this and that and the other thing. But now that we look at it from this standpoint, would it have been nice to see Jake Guentzel go on a run and win his second Stanley Cup and get Carolina their first Stanley Cup since, 2006, I believe was the last time they won it? Yeah, it would have been nice to see that, especially because the Penguins would have gotten the 31st or 32nd overall selection if they would have made it to the final. And if they would have won, they would have also gotten a bonus selection in the fifth round. So that would have been nice. But at the end of the day, Kyle Dubas didn't get fleeced. And in fact, I think Kyle Dubas ended up coming out on top of this trade, in my opinion. And here's why. Dubas acquired for the Pittsburgh Penguins one immediate impact roster player that is under contract for 2 more years at a very reasonable cap hit. That player, in fact, is Michael Bunting, somebody that everybody enjoyed watching towards the end of the season, somebody that had an instant impact and also not just on the team itself, but on the score sheet, which is vastly important for the Penguins. He is somebody that came in and is expected to be one of the big pieces for the Penguins the next couple of seasons. So he got Bunting. He also got 2 solid prospects, maybe not the best prospects in Carolina's system, but he got 2 very solid prospects in Ville Koivunen and Vasily Ponomarev that can contribute as early as next season. Kyle Dubas has mentioned it on several occasions that he expects both of them to be at Penguins training camp and to be pushing for a bottom 6 role to add to that offense in the bottom 6 that has been invisible since the 2022 expansion draft when the Penguins lost McCann and Rodriguez that summer. And they also lost Danton Heinen, I believe, that summer as well. And they lost Brandon Tanev that summer. That really depleted the Penguins' bottom 6. Ponomarev, Koivunen are both going to have an opportunity to be impact players next season. Whether or not they are, they're still 2 of the top prospects on the Penguins team from that trade. They also got a mid-tier prospect in Cruz Lucius. Who knows what he's going to become, but he's had 2 solid seasons at the NCAA, and he again becomes one of the top 10 prospects in the Penguins prospect system. And then they also got a second-round pick. They got all of that. And what they gave up was Ty Smith, whom the Penguins were not going to use and were never going to use, especially after acquiring Erik Karlsson, because you have Karlsson, you have Letang, you don't have room for another offense-only defenseman like Ty Smith. So you give away a piece that you weren't going to use and a second-round playoff exit. And we'll get into what Jake Guentzel was for Carolina, and he was very good for Carolina. But at the end of the day, you gave them a second-round playoff exit. So what it was, and you can say what you will about it. Yes, it's good for the organization to make it to the playoffs and to get into the second round of the playoffs and host as many playoff games as they did. There is a benefit there. But the reason they gave up all of those things was for a shot at a Stanley Cup this year. And if they won the Stanley Cup, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Don Waddell got fleeced. I'm not saying that Kyle Dubas absolutely fleeced the Carolina Hurricanes. He didn't. This just looks like a very fair hockey trade that Kyle Dubas won because, well, the main objective was to bring Carolina a Stanley Cup this year. They didn't reach that objective. So I think both teams got something they needed, and the Penguins are set up well following this season, even if they didn't get that first-round pick from the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, I will say, Gensel was very good for them. He was. And if he re-signs there, he'll probably still be very good for them for years upon years. But that doesn't go into the determination about whether or not this was a successful trade, because at the end of the day, that didn't play a factor into what the return would be. Kyle Dubas couldn't say, well, the next couple of years, if you have Gensel, that really elevates your ceiling because he's not under contract. There's no guarantee that he would sign there, and they can't use that as leverage. So Gensel was great, though. I will say that. 25 points in 17 regular season games, the most points of any trade deadline acquisition on his new team. He also had 9 points in 11 playoff games, and I thought they were going to do it. I really did. They were up 3-1 going into that third period, and then it felt like I was watching the Pittsburgh Penguins again, which is unfortunate because I really wanted to see Carolina do it. I would have loved to see them make it into the next round. Them versus Florida or them versus Boston would have been a great series. Sure, the Rangers versus that team would be a good series too, but would have liked to see Carolina go a little bit further. But at the end of the day, Penguins weren't on track to re-sign Jake Guentzel. They also weren't on track to make the postseason. Yeah, if they would have kept them and gone on a similar run, which, again, you don't know if they would have, then they probably would have been able to make the postseason. And who knows what they would have done at that point. You can't continue to rewrite the history books with hypotheticals, but they weren't on track to re-sign Gensel. They weren't on track to make the postseason at the time. This was the right move for the Penguins organization. I said it back at the trade deadline. Yeah, I said it was a little underwhelmed, but now you look at it, you're separated from it. You see the fit of Michael Bunting on this team and what he could become over the next 2 seasons because he is under contract. I thought Dubas got a really good return for a pending UFA in a buyer's market. And some people might say this is old news, but with the trade concluding, it's a thought that I had yesterday, and I just wanted to share it. You know, people are still going to have the narrative that Kyle Dubas got fleeced, that he lost this trade outright. He traded a second-round playoff exit and a player that was of no worth to the organization for potentially 3 roster players next year and a little bit of magic beans in Cruz Lucius and a second-round pick. I see that as a win. Kyle Dubas has had many misses. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an apologist for Kyle Dubas. He's had those misses. He really needs to build up a better track record over this summer. He's had misses. He's had hits in his first year with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But this one, to me, it falls under the latter category as a hit for Kyle Dubas. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. A couple months removed and now seeing how things have played out in the Stanley Cup playoffs for Jake Guentzel and the Carolina Hurricanes. But that's going to do it for this episode of Ice-Burgh To Go. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Have a great weekend, Pens fans. We'll see you guys next time.